So you might be asking yourself, what does a flaked out, super sweet, beautiful looking paint job like this cost? A lot. Oh yeah! I'm gonna talk about it. I'm gonna go through a little bit, step by step. Talk about what you need and how much the materials are and how much the materials you're gonna need to paint a car, this size anyway. First off, you're gonna need some tools, just some basic tools to do this kind of stuff. If you don't have basic tools, you should just start there, get some tools. DA sander, air sander is gonna help out. I'd call that a necessity. To do a full-on paint job, you don't want to try to do it by hand. You can get a cheap one for like 60 bucks. You could spend $600 on a sander if you wanted to, but you can get a really nice, good quality one, $250 range. A stud gun's really nice to have to pull out dents because sometimes you can't get to the back side. About 100 bucks for the Harbor Freight version of that. About 350 for a decent stud puller. Grinder is really handy to have. To get an air right angle air mini grinder. I think at Harbor Freight they're like 20, 25 bucks. Paint guns. Can't shoot paint without paint guns. You're gonna need one for primer, which is gonna have a bigger tip because primer's a lot thicker. And then you're gonna need one for base coat and clear coat. Those range anywhere from 80 bucks, $300, $400, $500, $600. You can get a pretty decent quality one in the $300 range. And then a clear and a base coat gun, about the same deal, anywhere from 80 bucks to 300 for a decent one. Or you can get a really nice one. I spent some pretty good money on mine when I bought it. I bought it quite a few years ago. It's an Iwata LPH 400 with 1.3 tip. And that thing was about 500 bucks at the time. But it's been a really nice gun. I used it quite a bit and it puts on a really nice finish. So I've been happy with it. It's worth the money for sure. Some sanding blocks. Sanding blocks, be prepared to spend about 80 bucks on a pack of sanding blocks. Just get the DuraBlock set. You can do, I would say, 80 to 90% of body work with the basic $80 DuraBlock sanding set. Once you got all that, you can buy all your materials, which you're gonna wanna start with like the body working materials. I got a little list here. Little notes. Body filler, sandpaper, grinder discs, glaze body filler, which is just like a thin body filler. The body filler is about $120 per gallon. For body filler and glaze, be prepared to spend about 100, 120 bucks. Do not buy Bondo. Stop it. If you're buying your bodywork supplies at Walmart, stop it. Don't do that. Napa, pretty good place to buy body filler. Evercoat is about the best body filler you can get, hands down. I don't care what anybody says. Easiest to sand, fills nice, doesn't set up real crazy fast. And same with the glaze. Evercoat glaze is some of the best glaze I've ever used. Sandpaper, for your sanding blocks, just get a roll that has a sticky back. Get an 80, 180, and 320. Those will be your 3 grits you're gonna need to do body work. Be prepared to spend about 40 bucks a piece on each roll. It's about $120. Then you need some DA sandpaper. Same thing, I'd get 80, 180, 320, and then probably some 600 for if you're doing something like this, where you're gonna need to flow coat it. 600 grit is nice to flatten everything out with before you put your clear coat on. And that'd be about 160 bucks for all 4 of those grits. And then you need some grinder discs, just like 36 grit, 80 grit grinder discs. And then they have some paint stripping discs. Those are handy to get to bare metal pretty quick to like weld a stud on to pull it. So about 50 bucks for grinder discs, stuff like that. And then you need to start buying liquids, which is kind of the fun part, picking out your colors and getting all that stuff in. I usually do that first, and I get real excited about the paint job. And then I actually have to come out in the garage and do the work, and I get really discouraged. And then I open up the can of paint, and I'm like, that's cool. Then I get excited again. It's kind of what keeps me going. Paint you're gonna need. You're gonna need a primer to cover up your bodywork and fill in light scratches. You'll need a sealer to put over the entire car before you shoot your color on there, just to give it one even coat. One even color before you start spraying paint. In my case, I needed a thing called Intercoat Clear. And that was just to carry the metallic flake. So I needed some inner coat, and then you need just normal clear coat that goes over the top of the inner coat. And then you're gonna need some reducer and some cleaner to clean your guns and activator and stuff. Usually when you buy like clear coat, they'll sell it to you in a kit with the activator and all that stuff. And some people, I use the sealer as my base color underneath of my flake. Some people spray an actual colored base coat before their flake. So if you want to do that, you're going to need to buy a color, some sort of color, a base coat. On a car this size, you want 2 gallons of everything. You want, besides the primer and the sealer, you should be able to get by with a gallon each of those because you don't do as many coats. If you're doing 2 coats over the whole thing, 1 gallon will get you by. You can make it work. But even then, sometimes you're cutting it a little close. Everything else, 2 gallons, car this size, especially if you're doing the jams. If you're doing the jams, you probably want 2 gallons of primer and sealer also. Primer ranges anywhere from 80 bucks for some really cheap junk primer up to $400 or $500. I'm just gonna give you a medium price that'll get the job done and be still a quality product. A gallon of primer is about 130 bucks with the activator. Sealer is about 130 also. Now granted, I paid $300 for my gallon of sealer because it was last minute. I needed it, I had to get it done. So you gotta pay the O'Reilly's part store prices, which I did. Happy with the sealer though, nice stuff. But 130 bucks, you can still get some sealer. Inner coat clear, like I said, I got 2 gallons of that, so it's 260 bucks for 2 gallons. The clear coat that I used was about $260 a gallon. I got 2 gallons of that, $520 for some clear coat. And just hearing these numbers out loud, it's like, the flake, I got, total I used about a pound of flake over the whole car. And that was about 100 bucks. I mean, that price ranges quite a bit, but $100 you should be able to get your flake done for that. Then your reducer, your cleaners and all that stuff, surface cleaners, wax and grease remover. Gallon of those should get you by. I probably buy a couple gallons of reducer. About $150 for that. Then your car's painted. Look at that, all right? Let's say it's painted. Now you want to make it look super shiny. To get the super shiny, you're gonna need a wet sand buff, a whole 9 yards, a whole, I mean tip to tip, wet sand and buff. Those items are not cheap. Everything with buffing is expensive. I'm gonna talk about a system that I know works. Just, if you're new to it, just stick with this system because it does work. You're gonna need 3 compounds. Number 1, you see it down there? Number 1, 2, and 3. 3M Perfect It polish and buffing compound. That stuff works. So you need all 3 of those. You also need 3 different buffing pads that go with each one of those. There is a white pad. Let me color code it for you. There's a white pad. There's a blackish gray pad. And there's a blue pad. So you need all 3 pads too. And then you need a buffer. Makita makes probably one of the best buffers. That or DeWalt. The Makita is lighter than the DeWalt. It's easier to handle. I'd go with the Makita. If you're gonna buy one new, if you got a DeWalt, go for it. But buffing compound and pads, I think you can get the set on like eBay. It's not these big bottles though, it's the small bottles for like 150 bucks. Or if you want to buy the big bottles of stuff, it's like 220 bucks for that and the pads and all that stuff. The buffer is about $300. Then you need sandpaper because you're gonna have to wet sand the crap out of this vehicle or whatever vehicle you're painting, especially if you're painting in a garage. It's gonna need it. Start with 1500 grit, don't go any rougher than that because you will lose your shine and not get it back. I learned that on the tops of my car. I started with 1000 grit to cut it faster and went up from there, and I can't get the shine back. I think I'm gonna have to end up re-clear coating it. 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, 5,000. That's the grits you want to do. A lot of people will stop at 3,000, but if you're doing all that, you may as well just grab a couple sheets of 5,000 and do it correctly. Knock it off. Stop slacking. 5,000 grit sandpaper is no joke, though. I mean, it feels like a blanket almost. It's smooth, and it's not cheap either. It's like $10 a sheet, maybe a little more, maybe more like $14 or $15 a sheet. I know the 3,000 grit's like $10 a sheet. And that's just one piece of sandpaper, $10. But they last for a long time. You can do, I would say you can do a quarter panel and a door, maybe a little further, with one sheet of 3,000 and one sheet of 5,000. So they do last. You might even be able to get by with one sheet over the entire side, as long as you keep it wet, keep soap on it. So be prepared to spend about $200 in sandpaper, just the sandpaper, to wet sand and buff your old jalopy. And then you just sit there and buffer on out. You'd be sitting pretty. Let's see what kind of totals we're looking at here. How much to paint my lowrider? Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a big number. And just bodywork materials, about 450 bucks. Just liquids, about 1,300. Buffing supplies, not counting the tools. Keep in mind, buffing supplies, about $400. So yeah, you're looking at about $2,200 in materials just to do it yourself. That's a big number. It's a real big number. Be prepared to make it rain. I started buying mine early. I bought all this stuff over the course of a few months at least. So I didn't have that real sting of just ordering everything and forking over the cash. That's a smart way to do it. Plan ahead. This stuff lasts for quite a while, especially if you can keep it inside where it's not getting hot and cold. You can keep paint materials and stuff good for a year, year and a half. Yeah, and if you want to have somebody do it, I have about 120 hours into just doing the sides. Most body shops are anywhere between $50 an hour, $75 an hour. Let's just say $50 an hour at a body shop to paint that. You're looking at, for just the sides and the bumpers, $6,000. That's $6,000 just in labor to paint this car. Not counting the top. The top I probably had another 30 hours in, at least. And I have to redo it, so that's neat. But yeah, about 30 hours in that. So to get this sweet paint job is like $8,000. There's a lot of people out there, don't get me wrong, a lot of people out there that would paint this car this way for cheaper than $8,000. They are putting in a lot of work for not that much return. Because if you think of $50 an hour, that's not $50 an hour they're just handing you and you're putting in your pocket. $50 an hour has to cover your expenses, to keep the lights on, keep everything running, your rent at whatever body shop you're working at, all the taxes and fees and all that stuff it costs to run a body shop. So you're not just pocketing 50 bucks an hour. So yeah, when somebody asks like how much to do one of these paint jobs and somebody throws a number of 10 grand at you, don't have a heart attack, because it's not like they're getting rich. I've had a few people now ask me how much for me to paint their car, which I appreciate. It's cool that somebody looks at my work and is like, hey, do that to my car. I won't. I'm not gonna do it. I will not. I'm done painting people's cars for a long time. I'm not a professional painter. I get lucky every once in a while and it turns out okay. I'm happy with it. I know where all the imperfections are and I'm fine with it. I did the work. I got nobody else to be mad at. So I'm cool with the imperfections, but some people aren't. So that's why I don't want the stress of painting somebody else's car, because it's a lot of work. And I know the work that goes into it. So if I got a little hazy spot on the corner of a fender where I didn't get my clear gun to wrap around just perfectly, I'm gonna live with it, okay? Because it's a lot of work either way. A lot of people, when they're paying that kind of money, just won't accept it. So, not worth it to me. But If I had to paint somebody else's car, I wouldn't even think about it for more than 2 seconds unless there was a $5,000 price tag on it, at least. It would cost, for me to even consider it, $5,000 for me to paint a car like this for somebody else. And I don't expect anybody to pay a non-professional painter $5,000 to paint their car, so that's why I just say no. It's expensive. Being a thug is real expensive.